If you listen carefully, you might hear the soft rhythmic sound of a tractor engine somewhere in Shropshire or Exmoor, and with it the exasperated sigh of a farmer who's once again been promised certainty and delivered chaos. This is a story not just of chemical bans and trade realignments, but of political abandon, a story that stretches from George Eustace to Lord Frost and now to Keir Starmer. Because if we recall the original Brexit covenant with the countryside, farmers were promised liberation from red tape, scientific sovereignty over pesticides, new trade deals that would open the world to British produce. Instead, what they got was regulatory purgatory. Basic payment schemes were cut before sustainable replacements were ready. Exporters faced the icy grip of EU bureaucracy. And what was the reward for all this stoicism that farmers were supposed to display? An ever-tightening noose of rising fertiliser costs, dwindling subsidies and declining morale. George Eustace, himself a farmer turned minister, admitted post-resignation that the Australian trade deal he helped sign was, in his words, not actually very good for British farmers. That may well be the understatement of the decade. Now comes the so-called reset under Prime Minister Keir Starmer, an agreement designed to smooth agricultural exports to Europe by dynamically aligning with EU sanitary and phytosanitary rules. On the surface, this sounds like a win. Fewer border checks, faster movements of goods, reduced spoilage, but beneath the polished veneer lies a regulatory bear trap. As part of the deal, the UK must now adhere to EU pesticide regulations. That means nearly 30 crucial pesticides and fungicides will suddenly be banned, including treatments for potato blight, vital to protecting harvests during our increasingly soggy winters. British farmers who have taken a more science-led, data-driven approach post-Brexit are now forced to revert to a framework many see as shaped less by agricultural common sense and more by green politics imported from the Europe that we have left. Ollie Harrison, the cereal farmer, said plainly that he would have lost his entire crop last year if the current EU list had applied. And yet here we are. Here we are. As he put it, we need to paddle our own canoe when it comes to food security. But under this deal, Brussels has taken away the paddles, suddenly. There's a broader context here. British arable farming is already on the edge. Crop prices are down, fertiliser costs are up, inheritance tax changes from Rachel Reeves have already left family farms in fear of being carved up and sold off just to pay the bill. And now, with tighter chemical controls imposed from abroad, yields are under threat. Even environmentalists quietly acknowledge the squeeze. Hazel Doonan of the Agricultural Industries Confederation warned that certain banned substances have no ready alternatives. In wet areas, glyphosate is often used to desiccate crops for efficient harvesting. It's banned in the EU. Will it now disappear from British farms too? The government says exceptions may be negotiated, but only where they don't lower standards. This is code for not often. And what do we gain in return? Faster EU access, reduced paperwork. That will help vegetable exporters in Lincolnshire and dairy producers in Somerset. But many fear that the cost is too high, not just in chemical tools, but in strategic or in autonomous behaviour. Britain has surrendered its autonomy, has surrendered its ability to set its own farming rules. Not to Europe by force, but by invitation, and by agreement with Starmer. Once again, the farmers feel the needs of political elites in London outweigh the livelihoods of people who work the land. First it was Lord Frost cutting deals behind closed doors. Now it's Keir Starmer, whose technocratic reset feels to many just like another version of EU membership without a vote. We've heard this refrain before. The farmers are the backbone of Britain. But right now, that backbone is being broken by uncertainty, by political cynicism, by policies made in airless rooms far from the fields they affect. If this is the price of reset, then British agriculture deserves more than resignation. It deserves a voice, a vision, and above all, a future. As I said, the farmers I know were bashed on the head by the final days of our time in Europe, when George Eustace imposed the changes which basically stopped East European students coming over to Britain to deal with the short-term employment for picking up harvests, particularly bulb growing. It destroyed the bulb industry in Lincolnshire that I know of. And then Brexit itself, which was promised to be some sort of salve to farmers, has proven to be a disaster. That may well have been partly Lord Frost's incompetence. I tend to think it was. Then we've got the Labour government coming in and throwing the book at farmers with the with these tax blows, and now we've got this. It's as if Westminster simply doesn't care about our food and about the fact that we can supply food to the table in Britain. We are so dependent on vulnerable trade routes to get food from other countries, and we aren't looking after our own food, and we're not looking after our own farmers, and we haven't done so for far too long. We need to change this. We need to change this fast, because once the farms are gone, they're gone.